Jake was having the worst month of his life. His landlord had just stuck another late notice on his apartment door, and his bank account showed exactly $12.37. At 28 years old, he thought he'd be further along in life, but here he was, scrolling through job listings at 2 in the morning, desperately looking for anything that would pay his rent. Most of the jobs were the usual stuff: delivery driver or houseworker, customer service. Nothing wrong with honest work, but Jake had been trying to make it as an actor for 6 years now. He'd gotten close a few times, even had a callback for a commercial last month, but it always ended the same way. "Thanks, but we're going with someone else." That's when he saw the strange listing. It was buried deep in the classified section, almost like someone didn't want too many people to see it. Unique acting opportunity. This must be comfortable with long-term commitment. Excellent. Pay for the right person? Serious inquiries only. Jake almost scrolled past it. These kinds of vague ads were usually scams or something worse, but the phrase "excellent pay" made him pause. He clicked on it anyway, figuring he had nothing to lose at this point. The email address was simple. It's just a string of numbers followed by a generic domain. Jake sent a short message explaining he was an actor looking for work, attached his headshot, and forgot about it. He didn't expect to hear back, but the next morning his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your email? Can we meet today? There's a coffee shop on 5th Street called The Daily Grind, 2 p.m. Look for the woman in the blue coat." Jake stared at the message. No name, no details about the job, just a time and place. Every instinct told him this was probably a bad idea, but his empty wallet spoke louder than his common sense. He texted back a simple, "Okay." The Daily Grind was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who took their coffee, art, very seriously. Jake arrived 10 minutes early and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a small black coffee that still cost him $4 he couldn't really afford. He was checking his phone when she walked in. Even in a crowded coffee shop, she somehow stood out immediately. The blue coat she'd mentioned was elegant and looked expensive, but it was more than that. She moved differently than other people, like she was floating instead of walking. Her skin was so pale, it almost seemed to glow under the warm cafe lighting. When their eyes met across the room, Jake felt something strange happen. It was like a small electric shock, but not unpleasant. Her eyes were an unusual color, not quite blue, not quite purple. He'd never seen anything like them. She approached his table with that same graceful movement. "You must be Jake," she said, extending a delicate hand. Her voice had a slight accent he couldn't place. It sounded European, maybe, but also somehow older than that. "That's me," Jake said, standing up to shake her hand. Her skin was surprisingly cold, despite the warm day outside. "And you are?" "My name is Zara," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Up close, Jake could see that everything about her was somehow just a little bit different from normal. Her features were perfectly symmetrical, in a way that seemed almost too perfect. Her hair was white blonde and seemed to shimmer when she moved. Even the way she held herself was unusual. Perfectly straight posture, hands folded precisely in her lap. "So," Jake said, trying to shake off the weird feeling he was getting, "what's this acting job about?" Zara smiled, but it didn't quite reach those strange eyes. "It's rather unconventional, I'm afraid. I need someone to pretend to be the father of my child." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how it sounds," Zara said, calmly, as if she'd just asked him about the weather. "But I assure you, it's completely legitimate. I'm from a very traditional family, and there are certain expectations about having a husband and father for one's children. Unfortunately, my situation is complicated." She reached into an elegant purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Even from across the table, Jake could see it was full of cash. "This is $5,000. There'd be more upon completion of the arrangement." Jake's eyes went wide. $5,000 was more money than he'd seen in one place in years. It would cover his rent for months and give him breathing room to actually focus on auditions instead of worrying about survival. "What exactly would I have to do?" he asked, trying not to stare at the money. "Attend some medical appointments with me. Meet my family through video calls." Sign a few documents. Nothing inappropriate, I assure you. We would simply need to maintain the appearance of being a couple for a few months, and that's it. Just pretend to be your partner. That's all, Zara confirmed. Though I should mention, this arrangement requires absolute discretion. You couldn't tell anyone about our agreement. Not friends, not family, no one. Jake's practical side was screaming that this was too good to be true, but his desperate side was already reaching for the envelope. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam? Zara opened the envelope and spread some of the bills on the table. They were all hundreds, and they looked crisp and new. But there was something odd about them. They felt warm to the touch, and the serial numbers seemed to follow an unusual pattern. Keep half now as a gesture of good faith, she said. If you decide after 1 week that this arrangement isn't for you, you can keep the money and walk away. No questions asked. $2,500 just for trying it out for a week? Jake had made worse decisions for a lot less money. What's the catch? He asked. No catch. I simply need someone reliable who can play a role convincingly. Acting background makes you perfect for this. Jake looked around the coffee shop, half expecting someone to jump out and tell him this was all an elaborate prank. But Zara sat there patiently, those unusual eyes watching him with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. Okay, he said finally, but I want to know more details. What? What's your story? Where are you from? What do I need to know about our supposed relationship? Zara's smile became more genuine. Of course. I'm from a small country in Eastern Europe. You probably haven't heard of it. My family has very traditional values about marriage and children. I came to America for work, but I've found myself in a situation where I need to appear to have a stable relationship. She pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages covered in neat handwriting. I've prepared a complete history for us. How we met, our first date, your favorite foods, my favorite movies, everything my family might ask about. As Jake flipped through the notebook, he was amazed by the level of detail. She had everything planned out, down to specific conversations they'd supposedly had and places they'd supposedly visited together. It was like reading a script for a relationship that had never happened. This is incredibly thorough, he said. I believe in being prepared, Zara replied. When can you start? Jake looked at the money on the table, then at this strange, beautiful woman who had just walked into his life with an offer that seemed too good to be true. Every instinct told him there was more to this story than she was telling him, but his empty bank account and overdue bills were speaking louder than his caution. I guess I can start right now, he said, reaching for the cash as his fingers touched the bills. He could have sworn he felt that same small electric shock he'd experienced when their eyes first met. But when he looked up at Zara, she was just smiling that perfect, mysterious smile. Excellent, she said, closing her notebook. I think this is going to work out very well for both of us. As Jake walked home with more money in his pocket than he'd had in months. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something much bigger and stranger than a simple acting job. But for now, he was just grateful to have his rent covered and a chance to get back on his feet. He had no idea that this decision would change everything he thought he knew about the world and about himself. 2 weeks into the arrangement, Jake started noticing things that made his skin crawl. First, he thought maybe he was just overthinking everything because the whole situation was so weird to begin with. But the more time he spent with Zara, the more he realized something was seriously off. It started with their first doctor's appointment. Zara had told him they needed to go to her prenatal checkup, and Jake figured it would be straightforward. Just sit there, nod when the doctor looked at him, maybe answer a few questions about being supportive. Easy money, but when they walked into the medical office, Jake immediately felt uncomfortable. The place looked normal enough, typical waiting. Room with magazines and that hospital smell, but something felt wrong. The receptionist barely looked up when they walked in, just waved them toward the back like she was expecting them. The doctor was a thin, nervous-looking man who kept glancing at Zara like he was afraid of her. Dr. Chen, his name tag said, but he didn't introduce himself or shake Jake's hand. Just mumbled something about getting started and led them to an exam room. So, how far along are we? Jake asked, trying to play the part of the concerned partner. 20 weeks, Zara answered. Smoothly, but Dr. Chen made a weird face. When they did the ultrasound, Jake got his first real shock. He'd never seen a pregnancy ultrasound before, but even he could tell something was wrong. The baby on the screen looked way too developed for 20 weeks. Jake had done enough research after agreeing to this arrangement to know that a 20-week fetus should be much smaller. Everything looks progressing well, Dr. Chen said, but his voice shook slightly. He printed out some pictures and handed them to Zara without making eye contact. Dr. Jake said, "Doesn't the baby look pretty big for 20 weeks?" Dr. Chen froze. He looked at Zara, then back at Jake, then at his computer screen. "Every pregnancy is different," he said finally. "Some babies develop faster than others." But Jake caught the way the doctor's hands trembled as he cleaned off the ultrasound equipment. This guy was terrified, and Jake couldn't figure out why. On the drive home, Jake tried to bring it up. That doctor seemed really nervous. "Some people are just anxious around pregnant women," Zara said calmly. "It's a big responsibility." Jake wanted to push further, but something in her tone told him to drop it. Still, he couldn't shake the image of that ultrasound. The baby had looked almost different somehow. Not just bigger, but shaped differently than what he'd expected. The next weird thing happened a few days later. Jake had started spending more time at Zara's apartment to make their relationship look more believable.
Ow.
She lived in a nice place. Way nicer than anything he could afford, with expensive furniture and art that looked like it came from some far-off country he'd never heard of. He was making coffee one morning when he noticed Zara's morning routine. She kept talking about feeling sick, which made sense. Morning sickness was normal in pregnancy. But instead of the usual crackers and ginger ale, she had this collection of weird herbal teas. The smell hit him first. When she opened the containers, it was like someone had mixed metal shavings with old pennies. The tea itself was dark green and left a blue residue around the edge of her cup after she drank it. Jake had never seen anything like it. "What kind of tea is that?" he asked. "From my homeland," she said. "It's an old family recipe for morning sickness. Smells like ... metal." Zara paused with the cup halfway to her lips. "You have a very sensitive nose." Jake watched her drink the entire cup, and the blue residue definitely wasn't his imagination. When she finished, her skin looked different, more vibrant somehow. Like the tea had energized her in a way that normal food couldn't. But the really strange part came later that day. They were walking through the mall, just trying to look like a normal couple, when they passed a jewelry store. Zara suddenly stopped and backed away from the window display. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. She was staring at the jewelry with what looked like fear. I don't like silver. Silver. "It's just jewelry. I'm allergic," she said quickly. "Very allergic." Jake looked at the display again. Most of the jewelry was silver, but there were gold pieces too, and she seemed fine with those. But when the store clerk came out to wipe down the silver pieces in the window, Zara actually took another step back. "How allergic are we talking?" Jake asked. "It gives me rashes. Bad ones." To prove her point, she showed him her wrists. There were faint red marks there, almost like burn scars. Jake realized he'd never seen her wear any jewelry except for a gold necklace that she never took off. The jewelry thing was weird, but Jake might have written it off as a normal allergy. What really freaked him out happened the following week during their first video call with her family. Zara had set up her laptop in the living room and spent an hour making sure the lighting was perfect. She'd coached Jake on what to say and how to act, going over their fake relationship story until he could recite it backwards. "Remember," she said as she opened the video call app, "my family is very traditional. They'll ask you a lot of questions about your background and your intentions." Screen flickered to life, and Jake found himself staring at three people who looked like they could be Zara's relatives. They all had that same pale skin and unusual eye color, and they all moved with that same too graceful way that had struck him about Zara from the beginning. But there was something else. They all looked ... ageless. Not young, not old, just somehow. Outside of normal time, when they spoke, their English was perfect. But underneath it was something else. Words and phrases that didn't sound like any language Jake had ever heard. "So you are the one who has captured our daughter's heart," said the woman who appeared to be Zara's mother. Her voice had the same strange accent as Zara's, but stronger. "Yes, ma'am," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Care about her very much." The questions started simple enough. Where was he from? What did he do for work? How did he and Zara meet? Jake answered everything according to the script they'd practiced. But then the questions got weird. "What is your blood type?" asked the man who might have been Zara's father. A positive," Jake answered, confused. The three family members exchanged glances and said something in their strange language. Jake caught Zara tensing up next to him.
Do you have any hereditary conditions in your family?" the mother asked. "Not
"That I know of. Any history of unusual abilities? Gifts that run in your bloodline?" Jake laughed, thinking it was a joke. "You mean like superpowers?" "No, sorry, just regular boring human here." But nobody else was laughing. In fact, the family members looked almost disappointed. After the call ended, Zara was quiet for a long time. She kept staring at her laptop screen even though it was closed, like she was thinking about something important. "Your family seems nice," Jake said, trying to break the silence. "They liked you," Zara said, but she didn't sound happy about it. "They asked some pretty strange questions. They're very concerned about bloodlines and family history. It's a cultural thing." What culture cared about blood types during a casual family introduction? And what was all that talk about unusual abilities and gifts? That night, Jake had the strangest dream of his life. He was walking through a city made entirely of silver metal, with buildings that curved and twisted in impossible ways. The sky was filled with two moons. Everything had a blue-white glow that reminded him of the residue in Zara's teacup. In the dream, he could see figures moving through the streets, all tall and graceful like Zara. They communicated without speaking, and when they looked at him, their eyes glowed with that same unusual color he'd seen in Zara's family. Jake woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. It had felt so real, like a memory instead of a dream. He could still smell that metallic scent from Zara's tea. And for a moment, he could have sworn he heard voices speaking in that strange language he'd heard during the video call. He grabbed his phone to check the time, 3:33 a.m. As he scrolled through his notifications, he noticed something weird. There was a text message from an unknown number, sent just a few minutes ago. "Some doors once opened cannot be closed again." Jake stared at the message, his hands shaking slightly. He'd never given his number to anyone connected to this arrangement, except Zara, who could have sent this. And what did it mean? He was about to call Zara when he heard something that made his blood run cold. From somewhere in his apartment building, he could hear someone speaking in that same strange language from the video call. The words were muffled, but the rhythm and sound were unmistakable. Jake crept to his window and looked down at the street. Below, there standing under a streetlight, was a figure in a dark coat. Even from 4 floors up, he could see the person's pale skin and that too graceful way of moving as he watched. The figure looked up directly at his window. Even in the darkness, Jake could see those glowing eyes staring right at him. Then the figure smiled, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the shadows like they'd never been there at all. Jake spent the rest of the night sitting by his window, wondering what he'd gotten himself into and whether $5,000 was really worth whatever was coming next. Jake couldn't sleep for 3 days after seeing that figure outside his building. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every noise in the hallway made him jump. He'd tried calling Zara about it, but she always had an excuse. She was tired. She had another doctor's appointment. She wasn't feeling well. By the 4th day, Jake decided he needed answers. He'd been paid to play a role, but he hadn't signed up to be watched or threatened. Whatever was going on, Zara owed him an explanation. He showed up at her apartment without calling first, using the spare key she'd given him for emergencies. The building was one of those fancy high-rises downtown, all glass and steel, with a doorman who always nodded politely, but never seemed to actually see Jake's face when he got to her floor. Jake could hear strange sounds coming from inside the apartment. It wasn't music or television. It was something else. A low, humming sound, almost like singing, but in frequencies that made his teeth ache. Jake knocked on the door. "Zara, it's me." The humming stopped immediately. There was a long pause, then footsteps approaching the door. But they sounded different than usual, heavier, more deliberate. Zara's voice came through the door, but it sounded strained. "I'm not feeling well today. Can we talk tomorrow?" "I really need to see you," Jake said. "Something happened the other night. Someone was watching my apartment." Another long pause. Jake pressed his ear to the door and could hear what sounded like a conversation, but in that strange language he'd heard during the video call. The problem was, it sounded like only one voice. Was Zara talking to herself? "Zara, I'm coming." "In," Jake said, pulling out the spare key. "No, wait," she started to say. But Jake was already turning the key in the lock. The door swung open, and Jake stepped into the apartment. At first everything looked normal. The living room was exactly as he remembered it. Expensive furniture. Strange art on the walls, that faint metallic smell he'd gotten used to. But then he saw Zara, and his world turned upside down. She was standing by the window with her back to him, and something was very wrong. Her skin was glowing, not like she had a fever or a sunburn, but actually glowing with a soft blue-white light that reminded him of the moon. Her hair, usually that pale blonde color, now looked almost silver and seemed to move on its own, like she was underwater. "Zara." Jake's voice came out as a whisper. She turned around slowly, and Jake felt his knees go weak. Her eyes were completely different now, larger, brighter, with that unusual color intensified to an almost blinding degree. Her features were the same, but somehow more defined, more perfect than any human face could be. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice had changed too. It was still recognizably hers, but with harmonics that seemed to come from somewhere else. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Jake backed toward the door, his hand fumbling for the doorknob. What? What are you?" Zara raised her hands. And Jake could see that her fingers were longer now, more delicate, with what looked like faint markings running along her palms. "Please don't run," she said. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you're some kind of—" Jake couldn't even finish the sentence. His brain was refusing to process what he was seeing. "I'm not from here," Zara said simply. "Not from this city. Not from this country. Not from this world." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He slumped against the door, staring at this impossible woman who had just shattered everything he thought he knew about reality. "You're saying you're an alien," he said flatly. "That's your word for it. We call ourselves the Lumine. We've been here for a very long time, living among your people, trying to survive." Jake's mind was racing. Survive. Survive what? Zara moved closer, and Jake could see that her movements were even more fluid now, like gravity affected her differently. "Our world is dying, has been dying for centuries. We came here looking for a new home, but we discovered something terrible." She gestured for him to sit down, but Jake remained standing, ready to bolt if necessary. "Our species can't reproduce anymore," Zara continued. "Something in our genetics broke down over the generations. We're facing extinction." "What does that have to do with me?" Jake asked, though he was starting to get a horrible feeling he already knew the answer. "We discovered that some humans carry genetic markers that are compatible with ours. If we can create hybrid children, we might be able to save both our species." Jake felt sick. "You're talking about breeding? Like we're animals?" "It's not like that," Zara said quickly. "The children would be fully conscious beings, with the best traits of both species. They would be extraordinary. And you picked me because of my DNA? We've been monitoring potential candidates for years. Your genetic profile is almost perfect. But Jake, there's something else you need to know." Zara walked over to a desk and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like family trees going back several generations. "Your great-grandmother, Anna, do you remember her?" Jake frowned. "She died when I was little. My mom always said she was a strange woman, kept to herself a lot. Anna wasn't entirely human," Zara said gently. "She was part of an earlier attempt at integration. One of the first successful hybrids." The folder slipped from Jake's hands, papers scattering across the floor. "That's impossible. It's why you were so easy to find, why you responded so strongly to the job offer, why you've been having those dreams about the Silver City." Jake's legs finally gave out and he collapsed into a chair. The dreams were real? Genetic memory? Part of your heritage awakening? The Lumine blood in your veins recognizing its origins? Everything started clicking into place. The strange electric feeling when he first saw Zara the way the money had. Felt warm in his hands. The dreams that seemed more like memories. His whole life he'd felt like he didn't quite fit in anywhere, like he was waiting for something he couldn't name. "So what now?" Jake asked. "You got what you wanted? You're pregnant with some kind of super baby?" "It's not that simple, Zara," said her glow, dimming slightly. "Not everyone agrees with what we're doing. There are factions among my people who think mixing with humans is wrong. They want to find another planet, start over somewhere else, and leave Earth. Or eliminate the hybrid program entirely, including the children already conceived." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying there are others like you who want to hurt the baby? My brother leads the opposition. He believes humans are inferior and that mixing our bloodlines will weaken us rather than strengthen us. It's been trying to locate all the human partners and ... and what? Stop the pregnancies before the children are born." Jake thought about the figure he'd seen outside his building, the threatening text message, the feeling of being watched. "That's who's been following me. Probably. Hey, they know about you now, about us. It's not safe anymore." Jake stood up, pacing around the scattered papers. "This is insane. A month ago, my biggest problem was paying rent. Now I'm caught in some kind of alien civil war. I know how overwhelming this must be." "Overwhelming?" Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm apparently part alien. You're definitely full alien. We're having a hybrid baby. And your brother wants to kill us all. Yeah, overwhelming covers it." Zara's appearance began to shift back to her human form, the glow fading and her features returning to normal. "There's more you need to know, but not here. It's not safe to stay in one place too long." "More? Else could there possibly be? The government knows about us. There are agreements in place, treaties that most humans don't know exist. Some of your leaders have been working with us for decades." Jake felt like his head was going to explode. "The government knows about aliens, and they just let you live here in exchange for technology and knowledge. But the agreements are fragile. If my brother's faction gains power, if the hybrid program fails, everything could collapse. And where does that leave me?" Zara looked at him with those strange, beautiful eyes that he now knew were truly alien. "That depends on what you choose to do. You could walk away, try to go back to your old life, pretend none of this happened. Could I really do that? Probably not. The genetic awakening has already started. You'll keep having the dreams, the feelings of connection to our world. And my brother's people won't forget about you. Or you help me protect our child and try to bridge the gap between our species. Help create a future where humans and Lumine can coexist." Jake looked around the apartment, at the scattered papers containing his family's hidden history, at this woman who had turned his world upside down. "If I stay, if I help you, what happens to the baby? She'll be the first of a new generation. Children who can help both species evolve beyond what we are now. She'll be extraordinary, Jake. She'll be hope." Jake closed his eyes, trying to process everything. When he opened them again, Zara was watching him with an expression he'd never seen before, vulnerable, hopeful, and completely human despite everything she'd just revealed. "I guess my acting career is officially over," he said finally. "Does that mean you'll stay?" Jake took a deep breath. "I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah, I'll stay. Someone's got to protect this kid, right?" For the first time since he'd met her, Zara's smile was completely genuine. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jake said, looking at the papers scattered on the floor. "I have a feeling the hard part is just beginning." The first attack happened 3 days after Zara revealed the truth. Jake was walking back to his apartment after buying groceries when he noticed something was wrong. The usual sounds of the city seemed muffled, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. He climbed the stairs to his floor and found his door hanging open. His heart started pounding as he pushed it wider and stepped inside. The place had been completely torn apart. Every drawer was pulled out, every cushion sliced open, books scattered everywhere. But this wasn't a normal break-in. Nothing was stolen, his laptop was still there, his TV untouched. Someone had been looking for something specific. What? Really? Freaked him out was how quiet it was. No neighbors had called the police. No one had heard anything. It was like whoever did this had somehow made the whole building go deaf while they worked. Jake called Zara immediately. They were in my apartment. Are you hurt? Her voice was sharp with worry. No, but they destroyed everything. How did they get in without anyone hearing? They have abilities that humans don't understand. Technology that can create silence bubbles, make people forget what they've seen. Pack whatever you can carry. You can't stay there anymore. Jake grabbed a backpack and threw in some clothes, his phone charger, and the few family photos he owned. As he was leaving, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Burned into his wooden coffee table were symbols that looked like the markings he'd seen on Zara's palms. Someone was definitely sending a message. He moved in with Zara that night, and she explained more about what they were up against. Her brother Kale led a group called the Purists who believed that mixing with humans would destroy their species. Rather than save it, they saw the hybrid children as abominations that needed to be stopped. How many of them are there? Jake asked as they set up extra locks on Zara's door. Maybe 50 here in the city, but they have supporters on our homeworld. If Kale proves that the hybrid program is dangerous, he could convince our entire government to abandon Earth. And do what? Find another planet. Leave yours to die from the climate problems your species is creating. Jake hadn't thought about it that way. You guys could actually help us fix things here? Our technology could solve most of your environmental issues in a few decades. But only if we stay. And only if we can prove that cooperation works. The next few weeks were like living in a nightmare. Jake couldn't go anywhere without feeling like he was being watched. His phone would ring at all hours with no one on the other end. Sometimes he'd wake up to find frost on his windows, even though it was summer. And Zara explained that some of her people could manipulate temperature as a warning tactic. The worst part was how normal everything looked on the surface. Jake still had to eat, still had to pay bills, still had to pretend everything was fine when he talked to his family. His mom called to check on him, and he had to act like his biggest concern was still his acting career. "You sound stressed, honey," she said during one of their calls. "Just work stuff, Mom. You know how it is. Well, don't forget to take care of yourself." And Jake, if something was really wrong, you'd tell me, right? Jake almost broke down right there. "Of course, Mom." But how could he tell her that he was? Part alien, living with a pregnant extraterrestrial, and being hunted by space militants. She'd think he'd lost his mind. The situation got worse when Zara started showing Jake what his people were really capable of. She took him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where some of her allies had set up a safe meeting place. "There are things you need to see," she said as they walked through the empty building. "If we're going to survive this, you need to understand what we're really dealing with." In the basement of the warehouse, Jake found himself in what looked like something from a science fiction movie. Advanced technology that hummed with energy, screens showing star maps and data he couldn't understand. And several other Luminae who moved with that same impossible grace as Zara. "This is our monitoring station," Zara explained. "We track Kale's movements from here. Try to stay one step ahead." Jake watched in amazement as one of Zara's allies waved his hand over a control panel, making holographic displays appear in the air. Another woman seemed to be communicating with someone without speaking, her eyes glowing as information flowed directly into her mind. "How long have you guys been able to do this stuff?" Jake asked. "We've had this technology for thousands of years," Zara said. "But Jake, there's something else. Something about you specifically." She led him to a scanner that looked like a cross between an MRI machine and something from Star Trek. "The genetic awakening we talked about, it's progressing faster than we expected. You're developing abilities." "What kind of abilities?" "That's what we need to find out."
Wait.
Jake hesitated. Every instinct told him that stepping into that machine would change him permanently. But he'd already come this far. The scan felt like being submerged in warm water, filled with electricity. Jake could feel something moving through his body, mapping every cell, every strand of DNA. When it was over, the readouts showed patterns that even he could tell were unusual. "Remarkable," said one of Zara's allies, studying the results. "His hybrid genetics are more active than we've ever seen. It's not just carrying dormant Luminae DNA, it's integrating with his human biology." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. Though he was afraid to hear the answer, "It means you're becoming something new," Zara said quietly. "The first true human-Lumine hybrid." Over the next few days, Jake started noticing changes. His vision became sharper, especially in low light. He could hear conversations from impossible distances. Sometimes, when he concentrated, he could sense the emotions of people around him. But the most dramatic change happened during Kale's first direct attack. Jake and Zara were leaving the warehouse late one night when they found themselves surrounded. Dark figures emerged from the shadows, moving with predatory grace. Jake counted at least 6 of them, all with the same pale skin and glowing eyes he'd learned to associate with Zara's people. "Sister," said one of them, and Jake knew immediately this had to be Kale. He was taller than Zara with sharper features and eyes that burned with cold fire. "You've caused us a great deal of trouble, Kale," Zara said, stepping protectively in front of Jake. "This doesn't have to end in violence, doesn't it? You've contaminated yourself with human DNA, and now you're carrying an abomination." "The council sent me to clean up this mess. The baby isn't an abomination. She's hope for both our species." Kale laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Hope? Look at what you've done to him." He pointed at Jake. "He's neither human nor Lumine. He's a mistake." That's when something inside Jake snapped. He felt heat building in his chest, spreading through his arms and hands. The world suddenly looked different. He could see energy patterns flowing around each of the Lumine. Could sense their intentions like colored auras. "I'm not a mistake," Jake said, stepping out from behind Zara. Kale raised his hand, and Jake saw energy gathering around his fingers. But somehow, Jake knew what was coming. Without thinking, he raised his own hand and felt power flow through him. The two forces met in the air between them, creating a burst of light that sent everyone staggering backward. When Jake's vision cleared, he saw that every piece of electronic equipment in a 50-foot radius had stopped working. Kale was staring at him with something that might have been respect. "Interesting. Perhaps you're not as weak as I thought." "Hey, this isn't over," Zara warned her brother. "No," Kale agreed. "It's just beginning. When the child is born, we'll see what kind of monster you've really created." The purists vanished into the shadows as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving Jake and Zara alone in the darkness. "What just happened to me?" Jake asked, staring at it. His hands. "You defended yourself. You defended us. But that power? Where did it come from?" Zara took his hand, and he could feel warmth flowing between them, from both sides of your heritage. "You're becoming what our child will be, a bridge between our worlds." As they walked back to safety, Jake realized that everything had changed. Again, he wasn't just helping Zara anymore. He was becoming something new, something that neither species had ever seen before. And if Kale's reaction was any indication, that made him either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. Probably both. The baby decided to come early, and of course it happened at the worst possible time. Jake was in the middle of learning to control his new abilities when Zara doubled over in pain during what should have been a routine morning. "It's time," she gasped, gripping his arm with strength that would have broken bones if he hadn't developed enhanced durability. "Time? But you said we had another month." "Hybrid pregnancies don't follow human timelines," Zara said through gritted teeth. "Call Dr. Chen. Tell him we're coming in." The drive to the hospital was terrifying. Zara's skin kept flickering between human and her natural glowing state, and Jake could sense panic radiating from her in waves that made his head spin. Worse, he kept seeing dark shapes following them in his peripheral vision. "They know," Zara said as another contraction hit. "Kale's people are tracking us." "How can you tell?" "The baby ... She's scared. I can feel her fear." Jake had gotten used to a lot of impossible things over the past few months. But the idea that an unborn child could sense danger still freaked him out. "What do we do?" "Get to the hospital. Dr. Chen has special equipment there. The baby will be safer once she's born." They made it to the medical center just as Jake spotted 3 black cars pulling into the parking lot behind them. He helped Zara. Inside, while keeping an eye on the exits, his enhanced senses picking up the approach of at least a dozen Lumina, Dr. Chen was waiting for them with a team of nurses who moved with unusual efficiency. Jake realized that some of them had the same pale skin and graceful movements as Zara. The entire medical staff was part of the secret. "How long do we have?" Dr. Chen asked, as they wheeled Zara into a special delivery room that looked more like a laboratory. "Not long," Jake said. "They're already in the building." The doctor nodded and activated some kind of security system that made the walls hum with energy. "This room is shielded. You can't get in, but we can't get out either until the birth is complete." What followed was the most intense few hours of Jake's life. Zara's labor progressed rapidly, but it wasn't like anything he'd seen in movies. Her skin glowed brighter with each contraction, and the medical equipment around her began responding to her energy, displays showing readings that climbed off the charts. "Is this normal?" Jake asked Dr. Chen. "For a hybrid birth? Don't know. This is only the second one we've ever monitored." "Second? There are others?" "One other couple in Japan. Their child was born 6 months ago. The results were extraordinary." Jake wanted to ask more, but Zara's grip on his hand tightened. "She's coming," she whispered. The moment the baby was born, everything changed. The room filled with a soft, warm light that seemed to come from the child herself. She didn't cry like human babies. Instead, she made a sound like singing. Musical notes that seemed to resonate in Jake's bones. Dr. Chen held her up, and Jake felt his heart stop. She was beautiful in a way that transcended normal human features. Her skin had a subtle, luminescent quality. Her eyes were large and expressive, and her tiny fingers seemed to sparkle in the light. "Hello, Dada," Zara whispered, reaching for her daughter. But as Dr. Chen handed the baby to Zara, the shields around the room suddenly failed. The walls stopped humming, the lights flickered, and Jake heard the sound of the door being forced open. Kale strode into the room with 6 other purists, their eyes blazing with cold fire. "Step away from the abomination." "She's not an abomination," Jake said, moving protectively in front of Zara and the baby. "She's your niece. It's a contamination of our bloodline that needs to be eliminated." Jake felt power building in his hands, but before he could act, something unexpected happened. Baby Luna stopped singing and looked directly at Kale with those large, intelligent eyes. The effect was immediate and shocking. Kale stumbled backward as if he'd been hit by a physical force. The other purists froze in place, their expressions changing from hostile to confused. "What? ... Kale started to say, but his voice trailed off. Jake could sense what was happening. The baby wasn't just looking at them. She was communicating with them on some level deeper than speech or thought. He could feel it too, a warmth spreading through his mind, carrying images and emotions that weren't his own. The images showed him things he'd never seen before. The Lumine homeworld in its original state, beautiful and green, before pollution and war had destroyed it. He saw the first Lumine explorers arriving on Earth, not as conquerors, but as refugees seeking a new home. He felt their fear, their loneliness, their desperate hope for survival. But more than that, he saw what Luna represented. She wasn't just a hybrid, she was a bridge. Her unique genetics allowed her to connect with both species in ways that pure-blooded individuals couldn't. Through her, humans and Lumine could finally understand each other completely. Kale was seeing the same. Things and the hatred in his eyes was slowly being replaced by wonder. "She's showing me ... memories. Our people's true history. The history your faction tried to erase," Zara said, struggling to sit up while holding Luna. "The part where we came here seeking partnership, not domination." One by one, the other purists lowered their weapons. Jake watched their faces change as Luna's influence spread through the room. Whatever she was doing, it was stripping away years of anger and fear, revealing the deeper truth underneath. "I remember now," one of them whispered, "for the isolation protocols. Before we stopped trusting anyone who wasn't pure Lumine, we used to work together with other species." Kale approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. May I see her?" Zara hesitated, then nodded. As Kale leaned over the baby, Luna reached up with one tiny hand and touched his face. The effect was even stronger this time. Kale's entire body relaxed, and for the first time since Jake had met him, he looked peaceful. "She's showing me possibilities," Kale said in wonder. "Futures where both species not only survive, but thrive. Together, where the problems plaguing both our worlds are solved through cooperation." "That's what we've been trying to tell you," Jake said. Kale looked at him with new respect. "You're not just human anymore, are you?" "I'm not sure what I am," Jake admitted, "but I know what I want to be, one who helps make those futures possible." Over the next hour, more Lumini arrived at the hospital, not purists, but members of the council who governed their species. Word had spread quickly about what had happened during Luna's birth. They wanted to see this miraculous child for themselves. Each time someone held Luna, or even looked into her eyes, the same thing happened. Old prejudices melted away, replaced by understanding and hope. She seemed to carry within her the collective memory of both species, able to share experiences and emotions that bridged the gap between human and Lumine consciousness. Dr. Chen explained that this was beyond anything they'd expected. The other hybrid child shows enhanced abilities, but nothing like this. Luna isn't just genetically mixed, she's psychically integrated. She can literally help people understand each other. As the sun began to set, Jake found himself in the hospital cafeteria with Kale of all people. They were sharing coffee and trying to process everything that had happened. "I owe you an apology," Kale said, "and my sister. I let fear cloud my judgment." "You were trying to protect your people," Jake replied. "I can understand that, but you were right. Isolation isn't protection, it's slow extinction," Luna showed me what we could become if we stopped being afraid. Jake looked through the window toward the room where Zara was resting with their daughter. "So what happens now?" "Now we do the hard work," Kale said. "My people and yours need to learn to live together officially, not just in secret. It won't be easy. So there will be humans who fear us, Lumine, who resist change. But it's possible. After today." 6 months later, Jake found himself standing in front of the United Nations, preparing to address world leaders about humanity's new future. The secret was out, not all at once, but gradually, carefully. With Luna's help to ease the transition, his life had changed completely. He was no longer a struggling actor, but an official ambassador between species. Zara had become the first openly Lumine member of a joint human-alien council. Luna was growing faster than normal children, already showing signs of incredible intelligence and empathy. But the best part was how normal some things had stayed. He still worried about being a good father, still had to figure out how to balance work and family. He still occasionally missed the simplicity of his old life. Ready? As ready as anyone can be for explaining to the world that aliens are real and we're all going to have to learn to get along. Zara smiled. "You'll do fine. You've had plenty of practice at playing roles. Yeah, but this time I'm not acting." As they walked toward the assembly hall, Jake reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. It had started with a desperate man taking a weird job for money. It had become something he never could have imagined, a chance to help. Write the next chapter of human history, Luna gurgled happily in his arms, her eyes already showing the wisdom of someone much older. She was growing up in a world where being different wasn't something to hide, where the impossible had become everyday reality, and somehow, despite all the chaos and danger and complete upheaval of everything he thought he knew about life, Jake had never been happier.